listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the college football ACC team season futures preview for Monday, July 22nd, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
And this is one of our absolute favorite segments with one of our absolute favorite guests. That's the one, the only, Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. Brian Blessing with you, talking college football, and we're going to focus on the American Athletic Conference, odds to win the AAC championship game, regular season wins. But with the kind of information Bruce Marshall can dish out, we'll have you some good information on each and every team in the conference. Hello, Bruce. How you doing today?
Hey, Brian. Pretty good. Ready to talk some AAC?
Yeah, let's go. And what we generally do is we'll go alphabetically, but an overview for the league. It's a group of 5 league. The one thing we should note, Bruce, at the end of the year, this team just has not fared well in bowls. They go 12-22 in recent bowl games, and their non-conference schedule for bettors, mark this down, out of conference since 2014. Bruce, these guys are taking a big lighter to the bettors' monies, 13-37-1. Against the spread in out-of-conference games. Yikes, that's awful.
Well, yeah, it is, and they've had some progress. The difference, the thing to note about the AAC, at the top of the league, the 1 or 2, there's a real gap between the best and worst teams in this league, and it's been that way for a while, and it's been reflected in some of these point spread marks. And there have been some real disastrous situations in recent years. We know about UConn and what's going on there, and they're going to be leaving the league after this year. We'll get to the Huskies in a minute. East Carolina has had a terrible run the last couple of years. USF, point spread-wise, has been sort of a mess lately. Tulsa has dropped off the map the last couple of years. SMU has really struggled. But, I mean, right at the top of the league, though, UCF has been a pretty good money machine, and we'll get to them in a minute to see if the Golden Knights can continue what they've been doing. But there's a few teams that have been able to compete nationally, and the bulk of them have not. So that's something to keep in mind as we move forward into the fall.
All right, away we go. We'll start in the East alphabetically. We'll start with Cincinnati. 4 wins to 11 wins last year, Bruce, for head coach Luke Fickell. He's got experience on both sides of the ball. 7.5 over $1.30, the regular season win number that's available. The one question I'd have to make that big jump, if this were horse racing, you'd be worried about a bounce. Can they sustain it, or is there regression coming?
You know, there may be some regression in the record because the schedule is tougher. I mean, right off the bat, they've got a revenge mind at UCLA which should be improved this year, in an opening game at Nippert on a Thursday night, the first big weekend of the season. And then they go to Ohio State, and 2 weeks later to Marshall, which is going to be a tricky game. So, I mean, they're looking at a much tougher September than they've had in recent years before you get into the bulk of conference play. And then their first 2 conference games are UCF and Houston in early October. So it gets, and those are maybe 2 of the favorite teams in the league. So the schedule's much tougher. The team might be as good as it was last year, but the record I don't think is going to be as good just because the schedule is much tougher and they have to avoid injuries, which they mostly did last year. So we'll see how it works for the Bearcats.
Randy Edsall, second go-round at Connecticut, 2-21 in his second go-round, 17 straight losses. My goodness. I mean, a lot of freshmen got some experience last year, but this is a dog's breakfast.
You know, this might have been, yes, it has been a dog's breakfast, and a sick dog at that. I mean, they have posted some numbers, Brian. The defensive numbers are some of the worst I've ever seen. I mean, it's rare you see a team last in the country in both scoring defense and total defense. They allowed more than 600 yards per game last year and more than 50 points per game. That's almost hard to fathom. They were also almost last in turnover margin. Now there's a real -17. I mean, there's an extra kicker there. But beyond everything else, we mentioned this at the top. Coach Edsall is presiding over a team that is going to be leaving the AAC after this season. So they may not get any breaks in this league. They're going to the Big East. That's a basketball move. We're not sure where the football program is going to land. They're not going to be in the AAC in 2020. Most of the defense returns, but like I said, it was a bottom-ranked defense in the country last year. He's hoping for some newcomers to step in, but it looks like a real problem especially with that defense. And, a couple of Big Ten teams, Illinois and Indiana in September. Connecticut's in trouble. This program is really headed in the wrong direction.
East Carolina has plenty of returning experience. The one thing that should be noted, they have in recent years struggled against good teams. But enter new head coach Mike Houston from James Madison, where his teams competed in back-to-back FCS championship games. Literally, we're betting on the coach here, Bruce, and what that transition's going to be like and how long it may or may not take for it to kick in for the players.
Well, yeah, you're right, and I like situations like this where you've got a coach who's established as a winner, even at the FCS level, coming in and taking over a program that had lost its direction the last few years in a very bad hire. Scotty Montgomery took Ruffin McNeil's place after 2015, and that turned out to be a real disaster for the Pirates. And they were not just losing last year; they were getting destroyed. They allowed more than 50 in 3 of their last 5 games and lost their last 2, 56-6 and 58-3 last year to Cincy and NC State, respectively. So Houston comes in here trying to turn things around. The defense ranked in the triple digits last year. The offense wasn't much better. They do return a quarterback with some experience in Holton Nailers. But it's just hoping that this team will be more organized than it was last season and that Houston is going to prove an upgrade from Montgomery. This might turn out to be a team that offers some value against the spread because they're going to be way undervalued, including that opener against NC State. So just watch this team as a possible improvement, at least against the number. They can't be as bad as last year.
From a betting strategy, I'll throw this out with Temple. You've got Rod Carey coming in as the head coach from Northern Illinois. Historically, what this guy knows how to do is his teams play really well on the road, and it is an improving team. So you're looking for a coach to come in and make an impact and put a stamp on a program. But if that's a trend with a coach and he can sustain that and bring it here, it might be a nice little nugget to be taking Temple plus the points on the road. For whatever reasons, if you can send a message and manage a game when you're not playing at home, I'd be betting on the head coach on that regard.
Well, Carey, is one pretty good, although he inherited a pretty good situation from Dave Doran at Northern Illinois, and he came in for that, bowl game in the Orange, 6-7 years ago, and they played Florida State when Doran moved to NC State. But he kept them running, kept them going to bowl games, and you're right, they showed some good value on the road. That's mostly against the MAC, though, so now you're going to be facing generally upgraded opposition in the AAC. I'm not sure how much upgraded, but upgraded some. This is a situation that got a little messy, though, after last season when Jeff Collins took the Georgia Tech job, and they brought up Manny Diaz from Miami to take over, but that only lasted a couple of weeks before Mark Richt retired at Miami and the Hurricanes brought Diaz back. So Carey was kind of a late hire, so got a late start, and they didn't get quite the recruiting that they thought they were going to get. But there's a pretty good nucleus there. They've been going to bowl games for Collins. 7 starters back, including Russo, the quarterback on offense. And they're hoping that the defense is going to be able to pick up where it left off last year when it was pretty opportunistic. So Temple, you're right. I think Carey's established this is a team that should get back to a bowl game, but they've been playing at a pretty high level for several years, and we'll see if Carey can sustain that like he did at Northern Illinois. I think this might be a hire that works out okay.
An off-season move, maybe the biggest one that was made in all of college football, I think is flying under the radars. UCF 5-2 favorite to win the AAC championship game. It was going to be a really intriguing spring with Darryl Mack, the returning quarterback, going against Notre Dame transfer Brandon Wimbush. Mack suffers a season-ending injury, so the fact that Wimbush is there, UCF doesn't get derailed and come off the tracks. And Josh Heppel's 25-1 in his last 2 years, and the only loss was to LSU in the Sugar Bowl.
Yes, and this has been one of the great stories in college football in recent years. It wasn't long before that UCF was looking at a winless season that got George O'Leary out of there. So they made a real recovery under Scott Frost, and Heupel kept it going last year after Frost moved to Nebraska. You're right. Wimbush's addition here is going to turn out to be a real plus for them with Mack getting hurt. Mack didn't look bad last year as he came in for Mackenzie Milton, who had that devastating knee injury late last season.
He had 6 touchdown passes in the conference championship game.
Yeah, he played well, and he played well in the bowl game against LSU too. Wimbush, we'll see. And there's 3 deep at running back. They've got plenty of skill position work. The defense is a little bit depleted, especially in the front 7 by graduation, but it's been good. And this team has been really good, also forcing the turnovers. They were plus 14 a year ago, that ranked 3rd nationally. So this is the team to beat in the league. They still look like they're pretty good, and the schedule sets up awfully nice for them. Toughest test will probably be Stanford, an interesting intersectional that comes to Orlando in mid-September. Or you can be looking at another big year in Orlando for Josh Heupel.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. All right, we move on to USF, South Florida. Won their first 7 last year, Bruce, lost their last 6. I don't know what the infatuation is with Charlie Strong. He throws the staff under the bus, so he gets a new offensive coordinator, Kerwin Bell, who's going to employ an up-tempo offense, which is weird because Strong held Lamar Jackson back. This guy is a conservative coach who now's got an offensive coordinator who wants to go up-tempo. We'll see who wins out there.
Yeah, and last year, once the schedule started to get a little bit tougher for USF, that season went down the drain in a hurry. I mean, they started 7-0 and they ended 7-6. That was one of the worst. No team in college history had done any worse after starting 7-0. It would be impossible losing your last 6, but that was very depressing, and it was just a function of the schedule getting tougher. And I could tell at midseason last year when USF struggled to beat a poor UConn team that this team wasn't as good as that record. Now, they're going to try to do some more things offensively, like you said. Maybe Kerwin Bell can make them go up tempo a bit more. He used to be a quarterback in college down there at Florida. Now he's going to try to make Blake Barnett, who's transferred around, played here last year, but he had already been at Alabama and Arizona State in his career. Let's see if he can post better numbers. Down the stretch, he was bad last year, and the defense really fell apart. I'm not a big Charlie Strong fan either. They were burning money as well down the stretch. They got crushed by Marshall in the bowl game. They opened up with Wisconsin on Friday night of opening week at home, so that might be a rough start and could be portend things to come for the Bulls.
South Florida 12-1 to win the conference championship game. All right, the AAC, we go to the West. And the big offseason news, Dana Holgorsen comes over from West Virginia. 5 years, 20 million potatoes. And that would be on the premise that ultimately Houston may move out of this conference. But it's all about offense with this guy. And, oh, by the way, they lose their stud, Ed Oliver, to the NFL.
Yeah, they do, but it's going to be about offense with Holgorsen, although his West Virginia defenses did improve a little bit as his career went on there in Morgantown. And you're right, this is a big hire, and I applaud Houston for recognizing early that Major Applewhite wasn't cutting it as head coach, and it was confirmed by that 70 to 14 loss in the Armed Forces Bowl in Fort Worth to Army. So they made the change. They have swung for the fences before in Houston. Usually these hires work out pretty well. I mean, they did bring Tom Herman in a couple of years ago, and I think Holgorsen does well. I would really watch these guys because they've got a quarterback in Derek King who was hurt last year, well before the season ended. He'd almost thrown for 3,000 yards and 36 TDs with more than a month to go in the season last year. I think he is a dark horse Heisman candidate. The numbers he could possibly put up for Holgorsen if he can stay healthy. Now, dark horse because Tua from Alabama and Lawrence for Clemson are the heavy favorites right now. But what he could do in Holgorsen's offense is kind of scary. They got a transfer running back from Texas, Kyle Porter, they think is going to be pretty solid. And the question is going to be on defense, as it often is with Holgorsen's teams. Opener at Oklahoma, that's interesting. Watch that one. Washington State also comes in to Houston in the middle of September. So it's a challenging non-conference slate. But watch Derek King and the sort of numbers he can put up. They might be spectacular this year.
Houston, third choice, 7-2 to win the AAC. I would just say this. First month, I'd be looking to play Houston over the total while they try to figure out what they're doing on defense. I think it'll be track meet city there. Memphis, Mike Norvell is the head coach. Tons of great experience and a quarterback to boot.
Yep, and they do. They return much of their offense and defense, and most importantly, they return Norvell, who's turned into kind of a hot commodity in the coaching ranks. They're doing what they can to keep him there in Memphis, and they're paying him pretty well, too. But this is a guy I think is going to end up somewhere else pretty darn soon. The success he's had there with the Tigers, 26-14 in the last 3 years. Talking about the quarterback, you mentioned that. Brady White, transfer from Arizona State. Looking to take the Tigers to their third straight AAC title game, threw for almost 3,300 yards, 26 touchdowns last year. Now, Henderson, their top running back, did move on to the NFL a bit early, but they haven't been caught short at backs in recent years. And Patrick Taylor, even in a reserve role last year, gained over 1,000 yards rushing. So they will move the ball, and the line defense returns 3 or 4 starters, including a JC All-American and Everett Cunningham added to the mix. Watch that opener against Ole Miss. Memphis is already favored in that game. They'll play that one in the Liberty Bowl. Ole Miss is nearby, and that could set the tone for the rest of the season. The non-conference slate, for the rest of it, looks doable. Southern U and South Alabama before conference play starts at Navy late September. This is another big year waiting for Memphis. They'll have a showdown with Houston in mid-November that will decide the West in the AAC.
There you go. Memphis, second choice, 3-1 to win the AAC championship game. You mentioned Navy, Ken Niumatalolo, lots of turnover, only 3 wins last year. I would think this is kind of a mission team, Bruce, and the one thing we always know with the military academies, effort will never be questioned.
That's true. And, Navy, though, having said that, this has been a little bit of a downturn for the mids. They've lost 3 straight to Army. That's no good. From Navy's perspective, for sure. They've only won 4 of their last 21 games dating to mid-2017. They've played in some bad luck. They lost some tough games last year. They could have beat Tulane right at the end, had a shot at Army in the game there. Could have beat Temple earlier in the year, had a shot at Houston, too, but fell short. The defense had some issues last year. There were injury problems that Navy had and some quarterback shuffling around. Malcolm Perry, who has played a couple of different positions in the past, now gets the shot full-time at quarterback. He is a playmaker deluxe, and Coach Niumatalolo thinks that might be the key to getting the big play back in the Navy arsenal there, but they're going to have to tighten up the defense, and they've only got 3 starters back, so it's really going to be tough for them. Buddy Green, their longtime coordinator, is long since retired, so they've got to try to figure some things out. The new coordinator, Brian Newberry, comes from the FCS ranked at Kennesaw State, where he did pretty well, but he's got his hands full here. Let's see what happens with Navy. They're a team always to watch as an underdog. Niumatalolo's got a great mark, and they could open up with wins over Holy Cross and East Carolina to get some momentum into Memphis. Watch these guys as a dog. That's been a good role for them, but if they contend in the West, I'd be surprised.
Mostly with your presence, I'm confident that we're dishing out a lot of really good information here, but I will say the best thing that we've done or will do in this podcast is both you and I pronounced Navy, the head coach's name properly. I don't know how we did it, but we both did it.
Niumatalolo. That's watching all those Hawaii games that used to air late. He used to play at Hawaii long ago. I remember him there, and we got his name down right at least.
All right, we go to SMU. Transfer quarterback Shane Buechele in from Texas. He's got stud wideouts to work with. Defense was a little bit better in 2018. SMU might be a team you can make a little money with against the spread.
Yeah, they might. And Buechele had thought to be the guy at Texas for a while before Sam Ehlinger knocked him out of the job a couple of years ago. So he's a senior grad transfer. I'm not sure this is an upgrade for SMU because Ben Hicks put up a lot of yardage for them at quarterback for Dykes last year and actually for the last couple of years. But he has transferred to Arkansas. We'll talk about him in a later update about the SEC. But Buechele has a name and he's got some experience, and he has completed better than 62% of his passes in his career. For the Longhorns, he's got some receivers to work with here, and he's got Sonny Dykes, a very progressive offensive coach. You wonder, though, always about defense with the Dykes team. They were bad at Cal when he was there. Last year, this team allowed almost 36 points per game. That was 110th nationally. we'll see how Buechele does stepping in. I think they'll look a lot like they did last year. The schedule, there's a chance they could be 3-0 heading into the Metroplex War at TCU September 21. And I think that's sort of the pivot game for SMU. If they can pull the upset there, it could be a big year in Dallas. If not, they will probably struggle to get back to a bowl, which they missed last year. So this team can kind of go either way. Watch that TCU game September 21.
Then we go on to Tulane, 20-1 to win the conference championship game. 7 wins, trending the right way under head coach Willie Fritz. Running game, pretty solid. And, Bruce, they may have found a diamond in the rough here with Oklahoma State wide receiver Jalen McCleskey. That's a big weapon.
Yeah, he comes in there, late arrival, and he shows up. And, last year, transfers helped out last year, too. Justin McMillan, who arrived just before the season from LSU, turned into a pretty good quarterback down the stretch for them. And he returns along, and McCleskey shows up here. Mooney, receiver, comes back, put up some big numbers last year, and Darius Bradwell, top running back, was over 1,100 yards. Running the football is what Fritz does. It's a version of the option here that he runs. It's a little bit like the Rich Rod offense, which we saw at Tulane many years ago. So they will definitely keep the football on the ground, and they can run the clock that way. And McMillan turned into a good leader. They also won a bowl game last year, got back to the postseason, and handled the Raging Cajuns pretty good down in the Cure Bowl. So there's some momentum building there. Fritz is a winning coach. He won at Sam Houston. He won at Georgia Southern. And I think he's got Tulane turned around here. First bowl win in 16 years. They may take their lumps a little bit in September. They've got Auburn in week 2, although they could be an interesting underdog there. And the opener against Florida International is kind of interesting because the Golden Panthers are going to be maybe the team to beat in CUSA. So it's an interesting schedule, but Fritz has Tulane competitive, and they're usually pretty tough as an underdog. So watch the Green Wave. Don't underestimate them.
And finally, Tulsa. And I think this might be a team you can stick your toe in the water a little bit, taking points with these guys. Only 5 wins the last 2 years under head coach Phil Montgomery. But the defense is decent, and they played a lot of close games. But, Bruce, what's gone on here, and specifically in 2018, this was a program decimated by injuries. If they can stay healthy, they might be able to hang around in some games.
Well, they might. I think this is the most intriguing team in the league because a couple of years ago we were talking about Philip Montgomery as the next big thing coaching-wise, and he was going to be probably pulled out of Tulsa to go somewhere else. He came off of Art Briles' staff at Baylor before that thing unraveled in Waco. His first couple of teams at Tulsa were dramatically good, and they had an offense that was dynamic, and they ran the football, and they went to bowl games, and they were very good. It has fallen apart the last 2 years. Now, like you said, there was some injury issues last year, but they've only won 5 games the last 2 years. So that's a dramatic downturn in the program. And for Montgomery to stick around a little bit further, he's going to have something of a turnaround this year. We'll see. They do have a transfer quarterback from Baylor, Zach Smith, who played extensively 2 years ago when things were really a struggle for the Bears. But he gets a shot here. And he's got a top-notch running back in Shamari Brooks, who will hopefully put up some big yards. Tulsa usually runs the football pretty well for Montgomery. The passing attack went down. They couldn't stop anybody defensively against the run last year, although most of the front seven is back. Opening game at Michigan State on that Friday night of opening week. Yeah, I could see maybe taking a shot with Tulsa as a big underdog in that game. But I would watch the situation very closely because the defense wasn't good, and Montgomery's teams have had a real downturn in the last couple of years. Surprised a lot of us who thought he was the next big thing. So this is a team that's sort of an X factor to me in the American.
Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. He's our go-to guy. Outstanding information on the AAC. I'm Brian Blessing. Stay with us. Coming up soon, we're going to have a preview of the ACC as college football, the season is right around the corner.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com. And reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and The Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.